let's get to these AEW cuts. These were wild, man. Wild. We got Ricky Starks and Miro were both cut this week, and Malakai Black's contract expired. And Malakai Black seems to be earmarked for WWE. And I think that makes sense. He seems like a Triple H guy. It has been reported for a while that he was likely gone. Well, his contract officially expired. There's some reporting out there, and I think it's coming from Keller, that he challenged the injury time on his deal and won. And if that's the case, now I don't know if this is true or not, so don't quote me on this. But if that's the case, that is a big revelation. That is huge, because if he was able to do it, any other talent that doesn't want that can now use that as precedent in their fight against having injury time added on. Now, there's a catch-22 with the injury time. That actually benefits a lot of people, right? Because there's a lot of people that get hurt and they want to keep their job for a lot longer, right? Like if you get hurt on the job, you get paid the entire time you're hurt, and then when you come back, you get to keep your job longer, right? Your contract gets automatically extended. You ain't got to worry about going to look for another job for a long time. However, in the pro wrestling business, it's a little bit different because some of these guys want to position themselves to get new contracts elsewhere, right? Or they want their contract coming due so they can leverage the two companies to negotiate to each other against each other so they can get more money. So it's like it's both good and bad. So I see both sides of it. And the fact that he was able to get out of it, if that's the case, I don't know if that's the case or not, but if he were able to get out of it, that could signal a big change, not only in AEW, but I think in WWE, because now we have some type of precedent. Okay. But Malakai Black officially gone. The Hounds of Hell are the tag team. I already lost the first match. But we don't need to get into all that. But yeah, it looks like he's going to be WWE bound sooner rather than later. Miro officially gone. So he requested his release a long time ago, and it finally got it. I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like it's pretty reasonable that Tony Khan waited until after the Royal Rumble to grant his release, because he's like, I don't want this guy just showing up in the Royal Rumble and making me look like a geek. But I don't think, even if he did show up in the Royal Rumble, I just don't see. If Miro goes back to I think Malakai Black, Aleister Black, I think when he goes back, he's probably gonna have a pretty good run, because Triple H just seemed like he was infatuated with the guy. He didn't want the guy to leave, but Vince kind of pushed him out. And since Triple H has been in charge, Malakai has been trying to come back, or Aleister, I guess we'll call him Aleister again. He's been trying to get back into WWE ever since. But Miro's a different story. Miro extended his contract, and he had so many different starts and stop pushes, and for whatever reason, like him and Tony Khan just couldn't get on the same page creatively, and he's been sitting at home for the better part of 2 years, not doing anything. And his final run in WWE was not good. Not through any fault of his own, but the storylines were god awful. Like Paul Heyman had him in a cold storyline, and that completely emasculated the guy in WWE eyes. Now he was able to redeem himself as the Redeemer, pun intended, in AEW, but then creative differences got in the way, and next thing you know, the guy is just sitting at home. And so one has to think, is like, would he even be, I think like the talent would welcome Miro back, but like creatively, like if you're WWE, this guy's pushing 40. He was a star, had a good run for a little bit, but do you really want to like change your creative plans and alter your roster to accommodate Miro? I don't know that you do. So that's going to be curious to me. One would think that he's going to end up in WWE, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. Although tonight on Twitter, him and Sheamus, it seemed like they were partying. They're having some Guinness beers at Sheamus's bar, I guess. So anything is possible. I think just being a TNA podcaster and just a guy that likes to see things get shaken up every once in a while, I think it would be cool if he had kind of a short stint with TNA and did kind of a heel of the month type of deal with Joe Hendry, just to see if the guy still got it. And he's great. I've always been a big fan of Miro. I was a fan of the original Rusev character when he got called up to the main roster. I didn't really see much of his stuff in NXT, But he got called up to the main roster. I thought him and Lana, I thought that was a cool act. And then when he got to AEW, I thought I really liked the Redeemer. I did not like the thick, shady, uh, angry video game nerd. I didn't like that character. I thought that was stupid. So throw that away. But when he came back as a Redeemer, I was like, oh, this guy's cool. That's a cool character. I really dug that. Um, and he had some really good matches. He was TNT champion for a while and cut some cool promos. They did a lot of cool vignettes. It seemed like Tony Khan liked that character, but for whatever reason, and I think it's because Miro just doesn't want to lose to people, so they just couldn't figure out the creative, and he's just been gone. So now, if you're TNA, would you want to bring this guy in knowing that he doesn't like to lose? Well, it's like, well, you gotta have those conversations with him. Like, hey, man, here's what we want to do. Here's the plan. Lay it all out. Like, you're going to come in, you're going to destroy 6, 7, 8 guys over the course of 2 months. It's going to lead to a big showdown between you and Joe Hendry in a fucking steel cage. That's the way it needs to be. Go WWF Bruno Sammartino style, except for no escape the cage rules. Just do an NWA style cage match, but in storyline. Heel of the month, kind of bring him in, heat him up as a big time heel, and see if he's willing to do business. Get it on paper that he agrees to lose to Joe Hendry. They do the big match, he loses, and then if WWE wants him back at that point, let him go back. But if they don't, sign him. I think that would be cool. I was never one of those guys that didn't like Miro. A lot of AEW fans like, he wasn't that good anyway. But that's not true. He was really good. He was. He just hasn't, he just can't get over himself. It's like, he didn't want to lose. Like, that's the problem with Miro. It's not because he's not talented. He's very talented. Very intriguing character, but he's a pain in the ass, right? And AEW has poor leadership. So what they do is if you're a pain in the ass, they just give you the silent treatment, right? Instead of trying to work out a deal, right? Trying to work out creative that works for everybody. They're just, we'll send you home and we'll continue to pay you, which is not very efficient, but that's just what they've been doing. And last but certainly not least, the main event, Ricky Starks has he, I don't know if he requested his release, but he's been trying to get out of that deal for a long time. He's been sitting for about a year. And there's been all kinds of trouble with him in AEW, and he did the interview with Chris Van Vliet that it wasn't authorized. They pulled him from a Game Changer show. But he's been doing other indies. So that's the big difference between him and Miro and Aleister Black is Ricky Starks actually out there working, trying to keep himself fresh, keep himself motivated. Out there working really good matches, apparently. I haven't seen him, but now, people talk. Said that he's been doing pretty good on the indies. And he's just been out there hustling, and him and Tony Khan were able to agree earlier this week. I might have been over the weekend that he is no longer under contract with AEW. However, that went down. Who knows? And then he actually, which shocked the shit out of me, showed up on NXT on Tuesday. And what they did is they had him coming through the crowd. They didn't say his name, didn't say anything. And it was their way of, it was kind of a nod to Scott Hall jumping ship from WWF to WCW. So when he showed up on Memorial Day 1996, he came through the crowd and he said, "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here." So Ricky Starks, when he came to the crowd, he said, "You know who I am," and that was kind of the extent of it. And he said that he was he was there because he's the next. I can't remember what he said, but it was your basic, I'm the next big star. He was very over with the crowd. There's 200 people, but all 200 loved him. And I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a really cool moment. Now, they're not saying his name because I think they're trying to create the illusion that he's not supposed to be there, but they kind of fucked that whole thing up with what they're doing on social media by highlighting it so much and interviewing him afterwards. It's okay, you're ruining it. It's if they should have done something where they made it seem like he was not supposed to be there. But it was a really good surprise. And people were kind of concerned that he went to NXT instead of the main roster because they, feel like he's pretty polished. And I think I agree with that. But I also thought this, nah, you know what? Ricky, he is really polished. He is great. And he would do well on the main roster, I think. But I just felt like he should go get over on NXT because while he did have some success in AEW, he wasn't like a top guy in AEW. Like Penta, he's been around, he's been on TV for a long time, right? Through Lucha Underground, Impact, and then AEW. And then when he was on AEW, he was like in some huge matches and programs with the Lucha Brothers, right? And he was a big star in Mexico. So I didn't think that he should go to NXT, and they pulled him to the main roster immediately. With Ricky Starks, had a little success with NWA, but that was internet. Okay, it's indie, and then he had some success on AEW. He had a victory over CM Punk in a tournament, right? He was a tag champion for a little bit, but he's also been off TV for a year, which in fact is working out in his favor because these hardcore fans are starting to turn him into a martyr, right? And it seemed like this is a complete different situation than Miro. Ricky's not being a pain in the ass. They had a disagreement over the feud with W. Morrissey, or Big Bill, whatever you want to call him. And he didn't really like that creative, but it's not like he's been turning down idea after idea after idea. That hasn't been happening. I think what did him in was the fact that he showed up at WrestleMania and was up in the stands, and there's videos of him on the internet cheering on Cody, and it's a carny business, right? You can't go see your friends at work. So that became an issue because he was up in the skybox and all that. So I just don't like the way wrestling does that to people, and both companies are doing it, and I think it's stupid. Like, he was there with his friend. Come on. Cody, and more than his friend, like Cody's his mentor, right? Cody brought him into AEW. So, and it looks like Cody brought him into WWE. But I think Ricky is not there yet as a star, in my opinion, not in talent. I just think in star level. So I like putting him on NXT. He's immediately the biggest star in the company on that show. And the men's roster, a lot of people are dogging the men's roster for being bad. That is another reason to put Ricky on NXT, because they could use the star power. They really could. And I think that he could be the NXT champion for a while and then get called up. Let him do NXT for 6 months and then pull him to the main roster. And not only that, they got I don't know that they were guaranteed to get this deal done, but they've obviously, it's been in the works for a long time, right? Both companies are doing it. All TNA does it too. All these companies do it. They're talking to these guys, irregardless of their contracts, their contractual status. So that should just happen. So okay, that's not a big deal. A lot of people want to cry about it, but like, if you're a fan of AEW, just know Tony Khan's doing that shit too, right? And WWE is doing it. They're all doing it. But they had the deal worked out for a long time, but they probably just didn't know when it was ending, and it ended over the weekend. It's like, fuck it, we'll just bring him in on Tuesday because we have the creative already set up for WrestleMania with our 2 main roster shows. We don't want to upset that. Although with SmackDown being 3 hours, they could probably use more content on that show, and cut some other people's times. But they wouldn't really have like a way forward for him if he came to the main roster right away. So it kind of makes sense that he would go to NXT, which has more flexibility. And of course, they just fired all those people from NXT too, and the main roster. So now they have room for a guy like Ricky. So I think he's going to do great in NXT. I know a lot of sour grapes from the AEW fans. I get it. He wasn't that good. He was not good anyway, which is kind of what, I went through that with TNA fans for a long time. They would say that about everybody that left TNA. It's like, he wasn't that good anyway. It's like, no, he's really good. He's going to go get over. At least I hope so. And if not, he'll come back. And you'll be like, I'm so glad he's back. I really liked him. It's like, shut up. But, sour grapes from wrestling fans. You get that with football fans too. And Deebo Samuel's leaving the 49ers, and some people are like, good, get rid of that guy. He's no longer good. It's like, no, he's still really good. He had a down season, but I do agree with trading Deebo because he did have a down season. He's getting paid a lot of money, and they need the money. So that's what happens. You trade valuable assets when they're not as valuable as they used to be, but they still think that they're valuable. Right? They still think they're worth that money. So it's like, okay, well, let's see if somebody else is willing to pay you that, and we'll get draft pick compensation, and we'll pay younger, fresher talent way less money to probably get similar production. That's football. That's how they do it. Baseball, basketball, and then even in pro wrestling, that's how it gets done. But Tony Khan doing these releases signals kind of a change in AEW's philosophy. They don't really do a lot of releases. And they released, well, Malakai wasn't, his contract expired, but Miro and Ricky Starks asking for a release and getting it granted. They didn't get it right when they wanted it, but they got it eventually. And I think Tony was smart. He did it on his time. You don't do it on their time. You do it on your time when it's beneficial to your company. And that's what he did. He wanted to make sure that these guys weren't in the Royal Rumble, which I don't know if they would have been. He did not want to have a radicals situation when Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko left WCW one week and the very next week they were on Monday Night Raw. They didn't want a situation like that. So I think you prevented some of that. Now, if Malakai and Miro show up next week on NXT with Ricky Starks, that would actually be pretty fucking interesting. But I think Malakai or Alistair is main roster bound when he goes back, and I'm not so sure that Miro is gonna make it to the WWE. I wouldn't be shocked, but I'd be kind of like, oh, okay, like I think it could be 50-50 whether or not he goes to the WWE. But he's a guy that never worked indies, so I don't see him like going overseas and doing New Japan tours because he could have been doing that already. So I don't see him doing that stuff. So what happens with Miro is gonna be pretty fucking interesting. All right, man.